The issue of the Korean Peninsula is one ultimately shrouded in a sense of mystery. Prior to World War II and the subsequent North-South split, the Korean presence in the United States had been prevalent in such areas as Hawaii and certain sections of the continental US. It was upon the split, however, that the immigration of Koreans into the USA reached a watershed moment. Particularly in regard to the North, those that opted to leave the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, for the Republic of Korea, or ROK, or the United States have become known as defectors. Many of these defectors have provided testimonies and other stories detailing the supposed brutality of socialist Korea. However, these testimonies are rank with inconsistencies and outside interference that results in the distortion of truth surrounding Juche Korea. An examination of the experiences of Korean defectors in South Korea and the Western world, in addition to an analysis of internal and external affairs concerning the DPRK and its defectors, the falsehoods and distortions surrounding North Korea are aimed to be refuted, at the very least in part. Really quickly though, before we get into the meat of everything, I would just like to say that, if you enjoy the video, I would appreciate it if you would like the video, subscribe, share the video around, and if you have the means to and you would like to, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee where you can help support the channel for as little as $1 a month, but again, that's only if you would like to, no obligation. I'm still going to be making these videos whether or not I get compensated for them. Anyways, let's get to it. World War II instituted a great shift in the public sphere and the experiences of Korean immigrants in the United States, with the ultimate catalyst for this being the bombing of Pearl Harbor by the forces of the Japanese fascists. Initially, a multitude of Korean immigrants in Los Angeles had practically been pumped full of joy after the announcement of Pearl Harbor and the culmination of the USA's entering World War II against the Japanese. Those in favor of Korean independence from Japanese colonialism, and simultaneously with a number of pro-Korea ultra-nationalists, had theorized that if Japan could be militarily weakened after a war with the United States, the prospect of Korean independence could finally be reached. For the Korean people, and in particular Koreans in the United States, war meant the possibility of liberation. Thus, it was a necessity that the US engage in a war with the fascist colonialist empire of Japan. Perception of Koreans within the USA by both the general public and the government, however, had not been the most favorable of views. In line with the passing of the 1940 Alien Registration Act, Koreans, rather than being their own demographic, had been represented as quote-unquote subjects of Japan, ultimately reinforcing the colonialist narrative as created by Japan, while simultaneously aiming to destroy Japan itself. Characterizing Korean immigrants as Japanese subjects resulted both in the further alienation and othering of Koreans in America, along with the enraging of other Koreans, as such characterization had been seen as insulting and damaging due to the history of Korea's vehement disdain for the Japanese Empire. What brought about the still evolving shift in Korean immigration had been the actual results of the Second World War. Following the defeat of Japanese fascism and the collapse of the imperial regime, the Korean peninsula had been split into two separate zones, a northern and a southern zone. The southern half of the peninsula was under the influence of the United States, whereas the northern half had received assistance and guidance from the Soviet Union. It was due to ongoing hostilities between the USSR and the United States, in addition to the culmination of the occupation and governmental splits into the Korean War, that the perception of Korea and the Korean people enacted a major shift that would remain in effect to the modern day. For the majority of both scholarly and non-scholarly works regarding North Korea and the internal affairs of the socialist country, one of the main sources relied upon for information are the testimonies of those who have defected from the DPRK and settled in South Korea and the US, among other destinations. While these testimonies are treated as invaluable and a necessity for a better academic understanding of North Korea, serving as the basis for a number of Western books and articles covering the inner workings of the DPRK, a myriad of issues arise in regards to these defector stories. Defector testimonies, however significant they may be deemed, often present a distorted or inconsistent account of their experiences, altering aspects of their stories and falsifying the information they provide. Shin Dong-hyuk, a man who had defected from the country in the mid-2000s, was the subject of various documentaries, news stories, and literature, most notably being the book Escape from Camp 14, One Man's Remarkable Odyssey from North Korea to Freedom in the West, published in 2012. Shin's accounts were repudiated, however, by DPRK officials in early 2015, releasing a video of Shin's own father affirming the inconsistencies of the defectors' testimonies, damaging the reputability of both himself and other North Korean defectors. Shin admitted soon after that portions of the book written about him had been incorrect, particularly regarding his alleged experiences in this Camp 14. Of the many defectors that have spoken publicly about their experiences living in and defecting from the DPRK, one of the most viral accounts comes from one Jymee Park. Defector turned actress and activist, Park's first showing of an inconsistent testimony came from her time on a South Korean television show that, when translated to English, is entitled Now on My Way to Meet You, essentially serving as both a satire of the DPRK and a series of anecdotes from women regarding their journey out of North Korea. Contrary to the tales of public executions, starvation, and societal oppression, photos of Park's childhood made available in the archive of the show display signs of prosperity rather than destitution. As these photos are displayed, Park pontificates that her mother had access to designer clothing imported from Japan, and even carried a Chanel bag, a high-end brand of handbags of great expense. When asked if Jymee Park's family would be considered rich, another woman on the show replied with, "Yes, that's right." Jymee Park's account of the North Korean experience sparks further distortion of the truth. In a very extreme example of hardship in the DPRK, Park claims that at a young age, she and her sister had essentially been left to survive on their own following the supposed imprisonment of their parents. To quote, "We couldn't go to school. We just go down to the river and we have a shower and wash our clothes there, and then we go to the mountains to get grass to eat." This account of having to eat grass to survive, however, has been both altered and rejected by Park herself. Soon after, Park suggested that it wasn't just grass, but a number of different plants and other foods being foraged. And then again Park altered the story, claiming that she and her sister had found various foods and taught themselves how to cook. On the previously mentioned South Korean TV show, when she was asked about having to eat grass for survival, Park, under the pseudonym of Yeju, rejected the notion, claiming that such things never happened. Jymee Park's mother brings further confirmation of the falsehood of such a claim, stating that, and I quote, "We were not to that extent. We were just never in a position where we were starving." External forces often perpetuate distorted views and accounts of living in and defecting from North Korea, with one of the primary factors being the financial incentive granted to those willing to tell their story. While only initially paying money to cover food and travel expenses for defectors, the pay rate for those being interviewed has risen drastically up to the modern day. In the 1990s, payments were as low as $30 for the interviewing of North Koreans in the Republic of Korea, and sometimes even in China. However, in 2014, these rates had skyrocketed to upwards of $200 an hour, and in 2015, these payments reached as high as $500 per hour per interviewee. The amount paid is, of course, subject to the significance of the information provided by those being interviewed. And it was in 2017 that payments for highly sensitive or important information regarding the DPRK reached a new high, particularly from the South Korean government. Designed as a means to seduce people living in the North into leaving for the South, the ROK government had previously offered approximately $200,000 or more for sensitive information. However, in 2017, the amount had been increased to nearly $1 million, with an updated offer of $860,000 as laid out by Newsweek. Over 60 defectors from the DPRK were paid a total of nearly $300,000 in 2022, with 15 defectors in 2023 being paid nearly $125,000 collectively. These distortions of experience and the influence of the cash incentive raise the question: what is the truth regarding the actual conditions of living in North Korea? One of the most prominently discussed issues is the food situation, with Jymee Park allegedly having to eat grass and the various other claims of chronic starvation, often used as a justification for embarking to South Korea, China, or the United States. However, the material reality of the food situation in the Northern Peninsula is much more complex, contrary to notions of constant starvation and scarcity. A variety of the factors that play into the situation are either beyond the control of the government or due to the constant hostility against the DPRK by Western nations. Environmentally speaking, agricultural conditions in Korea are not ideal in any sense. In terms of land availability, the Korean Peninsula is a highly mountainous region, in addition to the area's climate being detrimental to the available harvest and growing time. North Korea, for lack of a better term, can be a very cold place, literally. As mentioned before, the DPRK has been a target of Western hostility for decades. As early as 1950, the beginning of the Korean War, sanctions and embargoes have been commonly enforced from the United States and the United Nations, as reported by the American Bureau of East Asian and Pacific Affairs. The United States imposed a near total economic embargo on the DPRK in 1950 when the DPRK attacked the South, sparking the Korean War. Over the following years, some U.S. sanctions were eased, but others were imposed. Executive Order 13810 was issued on September 21, 2017, in the wake of the DPRK's September 2017 nuclear test and multiple ICBM tests. Combined with previous executive orders, statutory sanctions provisions, and other restrictions on the DPRK, these constitute the most restrictive sanctions related to the DPRK to date. These sanctions, which are ultimately an act of war, are designed to deprive the DPRK of technological and agricultural development, deliberately weakening their industrial and agricultural forces. Essentially, this is a deliberate attempt at starving the innocent people of North Korea in order to pressure the Workers' Party and the Supreme People's Assembly into submitting to U.S. agitation and forced denuclearization. These internal and external factors are definitely the main contributors to any insecurity regarding the North Korean food predicament. However, the sanctions and embargoes enforced throughout history and in the modern day have not crippled the DPRK nearly as much as perceived by the general public. Despite annual reports from Western news outlets of North Korea being on the brink of famine and starvation, these reports are false when examining actual DPRK economic data. According to a 2014 article from Al Jazeera, North Korean agriculture had produced sufficient harvest despite reports of supposed starvation at the time. Grain production in North Korea in 2014 had been totaling upwards of 5.03 million tons, well above the amount harvested in the time of the arduous march in the late 1990s. While this improvement does not negate the possibility and probability of agricultural difficulty, it certainly counters the notion of constant destitution and starvation. Several reports from the DPRK itself in recent times have also pointed towards a food situation better than reported by most Western outlets, including an increase in grain production in certain provinces, some farms producing more than called for in the state grain production plan, and an expansion of the country's dairy industry. Once again, there's no denying that the DPRK has endured difficulties in their food situation in the past, and is dealing with issues today due to problems related to COVID-19 and stuff like that. But the country isn't continuously teetering on the brink of starvation. As a result of the quote-unquote Hollywood depictions of American society and political workings, a number of North Korean defectors have seen the United States as the ultimate beacon of freedom, a paradise on earth, if you will. This delusion, however, is broken up upon spending an extended period of time living in the USA. In the DPRK, necessities such as housing, healthcare, and other similar institutions are a guaranteed right for citizens through a socialist economic and political system practiced through the Juche idea, contrary to the commodification of human life found within the United States. Upon entering the USA, defectors are met with the hardships created by the profit motive and the exploitation of a capitalist economy. With the lack of social services and general government aid for immigrants, and frankly those native to the United States, North Koreans are met with financial and political hardship. To quote a selection from The Guardian, "American life is so hard. Money, money, money," said Pastor Young-Gu Kim, an evangelical South Korean immigrant who helps defectors. "Some defectors told me, 'Oh, Pastor, sometimes I miss it over there.'" Despite many of the prominent defectors citing the DPRK as a hell on earth that should be dealt with militarily by the United States, there is a powerful section of the defectors who ultimately aim to return to North Korea. The case of one Kwon Chol-nam displays the alienation that comes with defecting and a longing to return to the DPRK. Facing difficulty adjusting to the profit-driven, capitalist society of the Republic of Korea, similar to the experiences of those in the USA, Kwon is a prime example of the destitution that many defectors face upon leaving the country. Suffering from societal alienation and stigma surrounding his northern origins, Kwon Chol-nam faces living in practical poverty in a small apartment in Seoul, the South Korean capital. To quote an article from the Australian Broadcast Corporation, he is unemployed and claims when he did work as a laborer, he was paid much less than fellow workers, or not at all. Ultimately, a decent portion of defectors long to return to the DPRK, with 2017 data showing that approximately 25% of defectors have either looked into or seriously considered working towards a return to North Korea. As of 2022, 1 in every 5 defectors said that they regretted going to South Korea. Various other instances of defectors longing to return to the DPRK after facing hardship in South Korea have been reported since 2017, with an article from Bloomberg, republished in the Japan Times, highlighting numerous issues of suicidal ideation, unemployment, and defectors being socially ostracized by South Koreans. Are there defectors who have done relatively well? Of course, but there are also a great deal of defectors who have seen the horrors of living under the capitalist system. A history of hostility and sabotage have contributed to the great shift in public perception of North Korea and the issues that the country faces. Sanctions, embargoes, and social stigma have all been designed to strangle the DPRK and force them into submission, with sabotage effectively encompassing both the geopolitical issues and the distortion of North Korean society as detailed by such defectors as Jymee Park and Shin Dong-hyuk. Is this to say that there don't exist problems internally with the DPRK and that all grievances towards the government are fake? Not at all, and if anybody is able to provide me with a good faith critique of the DPRK, I'd be happy to study it. But the issue of North Korean defectors has been laced with distortion, lies, and mythos. A mythos that is ultimately necessary to address and disprove in order to garner a proper understanding of the DPRK, its history, and the contemporary issues concerning North Korea and the surrounding world. My name is Jimmy. Thank you for watching.